today I have the pleasure of being joined by Peter Kovacs. Peter leads information security, privacy governance, and AI risk management for Nudge, a SaaS financial education platform serving enterprise clients. Peter, fantastic to have you with us.
Hi, Sasha. Thank you so much for inviting.
Thank you. So, what I'd love to do is just get into some questions that give us, our listeners, a better insight into you, how you're thinking about the security and threat environment at the moment. Does that sound good?
Yeah, that sounds all right. Let's go.
Perfect, perfect. So, to kick things off, the tool, framework, or technique that deserves far more attention than it's currently getting.
So I'm quite enthusiastic about threat modeling, especially the early stages of the SDLC, so the software development lifecycle. So when you are proactively identifying, quantifying, and creating control measures for risk identified at the early stages, once the design is finalized, you are getting a much more comprehensive understanding of the attack surface and a much more mature security framework around the system than when you are to start applying it at the later stages. So what I see in most cases, that organization invest heavily in the resources with monitoring, alerting, control measures at the later stages of the SDLC.
Okay.
And if you integrate that into a beginning, you will get a much better return on investment.
And why is that? Is that just because you can see the sort of like longer life cycle of the protection of the organization, or?
It's not really as an afterthought, right? So when you are start thinking of it when the product is very close to production in the late stages at staging or the sandbox area where you are trialing it out, or you already started beta testing with some clients, it's starting to get an afterthought that you are putting plasters all around it rather than integrating these control measures into the actual processes. And then when you are mapping this out, the threat modeling, it's good to think of it both from the information security side and the data privacy side as well.
Okay. And on that, you're obviously running both information security and data privacy as sort of one function of sorts. They are often treated as separate units in lots of other organizations. Do you think that your perspective around security and privacy has changed, having to look at that sort of like dual approach? And why do you think some companies put it together and some companies sort of treat them as separate entities?
That's a loaded question, right? So I think I can see the segmentation where it's coming from, right? So historically, both of them grew out from different part of the organization. Information security more often than not coming from engineering and IT, and data privacy coming from legal, procurement, and that side of the business. But the way I like to think about them, that they are the different sides of the same coins, right? So security protects the system and privacy protects the person. And they need to be in the same risk conversation. So when you are putting in logical controls or physical controls into around the system, around the platform, around the solution, you need to consider both of those aspects in the same conversation to make sure that they are contemplating each other.
And where do you find the biggest challenges in considering sort of like both sides of the coin? Where do they sort of meet comfortably and where do they conflict a bit when looking at data privacy versus security?
So it's mostly the prioritization that which aspect you're gonna apply most, and the pragmaticality of some of the translation of the regulation from the data privacy side, right? So some of the regulation they have to apply for a large industry, different size of industry, different areas of the industry that they are working in. And it cannot be prescriptive, so it has to be descriptive, and you need to apply it in a pragmatic way that you are meeting those requirements again in a pragmatic manner, right? So you are not, and as our CFO likes to say it, we don't have infinite resources. If we would have, we would do this, but we don't. So you need to have a pragmatic approach which would ensure a reasonable resources used to meet those expectations. And this is the conflict. This is usually where the conflicts come from, because security, it's usually very, very pragmatic, that what is the requirement and what is the solution. and privacy can go the other way. So some of the privacy regulations, so GDPR is a great example. That's what we are using as our baseline when we are governing our data privacy governance, and it just provides a very good baseline. And some of the aspect of it just needs to be translated through the organizational lens.
Right. And do you think there's like an educational piece there as well across across certain organizations, so at Nudge, in terms of like getting all the employees to understand those regulations when it comes to GDPR, for example?
Absolutely. So it's down to the granularity depends on the actual teams, right? So some of the teams are actually using those PII data of processing it on their BAU activities. They need to have a very granular understanding that what is PII data, so personally identified information under GDPR, and what they can do with it and what not, and what is the actual process and what happens if it's mishandled. Some of the teams which are a little bit further away from these personal data, they still need to have awareness when they are having conversation with prospects and clients, but they don't need that granular understanding.
Right, yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And then, so I know that you've we've spoken previously about sort of where the threat evolution is happening within cyber. Do you think attacks are getting more sophisticated in terms of what you're seeing in the sector? Or are we seeing similar attacks that have happened in the last 5, 10, 15 years, but they're being executed better, whether that's because of sort of new and evolving AI tools? How's your sort of approach to security changed in sort of recent months and in the last few years?
So both of them are true, right? But the scale tips toward that the same weakness is just getting exploited faster with better tooling and a clearer commercial intent, right? So the speed, the efficiency, what AI allowed these attackers to integrate into their operating model, because some of the larger organizations who do carry out attacks, they are organized crime, right? So they are not just a single person in a hoodie carrying out these activities. They are actually smart people doing it operationally to attack organizations. And I think this is where it comes down. So 20% of it, some of them are new because again, just AI allows to identify weaknesses which are not direct but indirect, or there are multiple steps to get there, which was not exploited at scale previously. But social engineering, phishing, credential stealing, weak identity and access management, weak passwords, reuse passwords are very, very known open doors to organization, and they are still responsible for most of the breaches around the globe.
And do you think there is then sort of a requirement internally to look at how fast cybersecurity is improving at organizations, and actually the sort of evolution of AI is just a reminder that we're still not quite there yet in terms of getting people on top of those things, such as like noticing phishing emails, improving their password security, including MFA, those sorts of things? Do you think there's still quite a while to go for organizations? I guess it depends on the size as well.
I think you are right. So depending on the size and the maturity of the organization's security posture, but most organizations now, when they move from a startup early stage into the still an early stage, but the middle, for about that's just a rule of thumb, right? Let's say 30, 50 employees. At that point, you start to think about multi-factor authentication. You start to think about password management, just to eliminate the factors, the low-hanging fruits, just to catch those, to eliminate the likelihood that you are going to be breached. Because this is one of the things that I usually say to stakeholders, that we are going to be breached, right? So it's not if, it's when. Yeah. So there are no organizations which are bulletproof with the people who protect the organization and the people who try to attack it, the hackers, there is a cat and mouse chase, and some of them they are a little bit ahead, some of them sometimes we are a little bit ahead. It's a continuous race. That's the beauty of InfoSec in my mind. So I just love the fact that it's a continuously evolving. You cannot stop where we are. So if we just stop looking at our attack surface, our security posture, our maturity, that we are happy right now in point in time, we are not going to look at it for 12 months, we're going to be way behind. It's a continuously evolving threat landscape.
And do you think, I just want to go back to that point that you mentioned about CFO and limited resources, what style have you learned to adopt as a security leader to be able to be pushing the business forward in terms of growth, but also acknowledging and pushing forward the security profile of the organization and making sure that's a priority? Is that something that you've had to sort of develop over time? Have there been challenges there? Does it depend on the organizational structure?
Yes, to all of those. So I think you need to develop a sense of the understanding of the business. So when you start out as a security professional in any kind of industry, you go by the books, right? So this is the best practice. This is what we should do. And when you get to a certain seniority within the organization, you're gonna get the understanding of the business as well. That sounds amazing, but we are a company of 100, 200, 500. We are not a company of 50,000. We just don't have that resources to allocate it to the best practice, at scale. We don't need all of these bells and whistles. Yes, it would be amazing, again, if we would have infinite resources. So I see my responsibility within the organization in making risk visible. So when there is a decision needs to be made, how we're gonna tackle a requirement, either external or internal, for relevant stakeholders, there are multiple ways. I just cannot go that this is what we have to do because that's the best way to do it and that's all. It has to be a structured approach, making risk visible and providing alternative options to these stakeholders, to the relevant stakeholders, that they can see that this is the risk and benefits if we do nothing. This is the risk and benefits if we go all out and get the best tooling, 24/7 SOC with MXDR, with EDR, all of the bells and whistles. And this is somewhere in the middle ground from a pragmatic approach, that we look at it in a phased approach. We look at it from a mixture of logical controls and limitation of, for example, the data what we try to protect. So there are definitely a phased, structured approach, and but that down to the bottom, just making risk visible to stakeholders.
And making them understand it from not just a technical lens, but actually just a realistic, operational, pragmatic lens as well, right?
So you need to translate it to the business language, right? So they don't gonna always understand what encryption means, why is it important. But if you tie it up into a renewal, if you tie it up to the sale, that contractual obligations, that this can be a reputational damage if we're gonna get breached, and that's gonna be the open door when the breach will enter into the environment. That could be a reputational damage, or there is a capital damage of the organization with what we can lose if we lose that client, for example. So you need to translate it into, again, just need to understand how they look at security as a function rather than how you are looking at it, because there are definitely two different ways.
Take the security cap off and
Yes.
put on sort of the
Yes.
not an easy thing to do, I'm sure. So, Peter, are you ready to enter the cyber incident room?
Yeah, let's go.
Good. This is exciting. So, just to set the scene, it's a Thursday morning. Do you, out of interest, are you a coffee, tea drinker?
I'm a coffee. I'm
Coffee.
absolutely a coffee.
Oh, me too. Do you like it black? Or
Yeah, just black.
Yeah, very good.
Just a nice Americano, watered it down to an almost tea consistency.
Watered down, yeah. Not too heavy early in the morning. Perfect. Okay, so you're sitting, you've settled into your watered down Americano. One of your developers raises sort of a quiet flag. So a piece of software your organization relies on, it was checked and signed off months ago, but they've noticed that it's sort of sending data somewhere it shouldn't. And it's not particularly obvious, but it's aware that things are going in the wrong place. Nothing has been triggered necessarily or alarmed, but it's a human that has noticed this recent behavior or change in behavior. By midday, maybe you're a few Americanos in, you're fairly confident that there has been a breach and it touches client integrations. One of those clients is a global bank. Another is a mid-contract to renewal. Obviously, those people and organizations' data is at risk and didn't necessarily choose your organization, but the employer did. You're leading the response. What's the first question you ask your team or the employee that flagged it?
Oh my God, why me, right? So that's so there is a lot of information. I tried to took some notes as well. So the first thing is that you mentioned it, that a person identified this,
Yes.
not an alert, so not the anomaly hasn't been detected. And this is going on for a while, so it's sending data out, so it's a persistent threat, so which is not good. So it's a good thing that an individual, it's a good thing and a bad thing that an individual identified it, and not an automated alert or a monitoring and alerting capabilities in the organization, right?
Why
It's a
is
good, so the good thing is that a culture is right, or at least definitely going toward the right direction within the organization. If someone, and usually, so the people who can identify these alerts are not senior, but junior to mid-senior levels. So the cybersecurity analyst, maybe some of the engineers who are doing something, or the tech ops engineers who are doing again something within the system. And the fact that they can stand up that something is not right here and can take that risk that maybe there is, but I'm gonna call it out anyway because I have a feeling that it's not. It just shows that it's not necessarily a blame culture. You're not gonna be, stigmatized just because you said something which might not be smart when someone said, no, that's perfectly fine. So I think that's
throughout your career, sorry, but have you seen the different teams culture really shows how quickly you can respond to things and efficiently?
absolutely. And this is happened with one of my friend previously. Then they had a partially successful phishing attacks when a few clicks went through, someone got called, and the MFA had been entered, but it has been shut down at the admin side, thankfully. And my first recommendation was that do not make a scene, do not call that person, right? Call that person out. That thank you, and thankfully that this person very early notified us, we could stop the attack.
It's about like acknowledge it, like almost creating a culture where you will make a mistake. To your point earlier,
Yes.
there will be a breach, something will go wrong. But I agree with you that I can imagine, like, in an organization, I've clicked on a dodgy link and then it sent me somewhere. My first thing is just like cross off and pretend that nothing's happened. And it's like, actually, no, we're all going to make something that we're busy. People have other things on their mind. They're probably not thinking about it. You need to spread that message that it's okay.
Exactly. And if you make an example of that individual who clicked that phishing button, and there is a breach because of that, and there is a reputational loss, if you fire that person, you are sending a message. And the message, it's not that you shouldn't click that button, is you don't let know that you click that button, right? And I think it's very, very important. And this is something which I also tell everyone who I have a conversation with this. I'm always bore people with this, that if someone has been phished before or clicked on a link what they shouldn't have clicked, they're not gonna do it again. 100%. And the same goes for organizations as well, right? So if they got breached, they are the most safe bet to use it as a vendor, because they do everything in their power. Surprisingly, the security budget just explodes, and they are not gonna get breached for a very, very long time. They're not gonna be the first one within their industry to get breached. That's for sure.
you almost like rely on them more than anyone else, even if they weren't there in the first place. Such an interesting way of like processing learning. And then, so to your point, you noticed that you mentioned that it was a good thing that a human had sort of noticed the error, but also that there was a problem with that as well. What do you mean by that?
So that's from the logical control side, right? So you have to have the monitoring and alerting capabilities configured bespokely to your environment. So out of the box, all of the endpoint detection and response, the extended detection and response, IDS, IPS, VEF, all of these, you can have that as a checklist, and you're gonna go fly through due diligence and certification path. But if it's not bespoke to your organization, if it's off the shelf, you're gonna lose out some of the granularity which is unique for your data flows, which is unique for your infrastructure, which is unique for your architecture. So you have to have that granularity within the setting of the monitoring, to identifying that what are the normal behaviors to detect the anomalies.
And so you've sat down, you've been told by this employee that they've noticed some sort of unusual behavior. When I picture a breach as a non-technical cybersecurity expert, I see it as like fairly dramatic, and they've infiltrated all of the systems. Something very technical in terms of a fault has happened within the company. When you're actually the leader of this response, what is actually happening? What does it look like, feel like from the inside, particularly in those sort of early stages when you're trying to sort of control potential damage or stop any real problems from occurring?
So usually it's not that cinematic, right? So usually what happens at the first few stages that you get confirmation that it's an actual threat. So it's not a false positive. This is something what we don't want to do, right? So someone is attacking us, someone is stealing our data, someone breached the environment. And usually you do that with the involvement of the right teams and right individuals who can confirm that this is it. This is a real thing. At that point, you initiate the incident response procedure. You can call it BCP, you can call it disaster recovery, that depending on the scale and the depth of the breach. And what that entails, that you open a war room or the incident management room, which is usually both physical and virtual. So you open that and invite the relevant stakeholders, which is a limited number of stakeholders at that stage, and you provide information that what we know now. It's very important to segment out that these are the things what we know, these are the things what we don't. At that point, you should have within the incident room, the war room, two groups of people. The first group of people are the one who can provide information and act on decisions. So these are usually the engineer, the cybersecurity analyst, the lead tech ops manager, the head of tech ops. So these person who can get into the infrastructure, get into the network configuration, get into the code, start collecting logs, shipping out logs to preserve evidence. And these are the person who can actually provide information and act on it. And you need the other group who can make decisions on behalf of the organization. So that would be your CEO, your CCO, your CTO, your CFO, if it's a legal person. So these are the people who can make decisions based on that information. And you isolate the incident. So you try to lock it down so it's not going to further spread. Because what might happen that, and you need very, very skillful people for that, because if the attacker identifies that, okay, they own me, they will start shutting things down. If they escalated privileges horizontally to other areas of the organization, they just start shutting things down.
So there's an element of like sort of not reacting straight away and preempting what they might be almost. Do you ever put yourself in the shoes of the attacker, and it's like, okay, so that they're obviously in the system, but if I do anything right now, we don't know how much access they have already got? Or is that what you're sort of weighing up? So are there times where you sort of press pause effectively?
So you need to carefully isolate it that is not going to get leaked out more data, and mapping out that what access that identity, that threat actor has, the epithelial threat actor has inside your environment, and just shutting down those edges. So it cannot touch anything else, and then shut down that as well. Sometimes that's not something that you want to do, that you close off that data flow, that usually one-way data flow, because you don't know where that data is flowing out, right? And if you leave that a little bit more open, you might be able to reverse engineer the endpoint of the data flow, depending on how is it configured or how is it set up. But that's something that I wouldn't be an expert on. So that's what we have specialists within the team who can advise and provide that information for the relevant stakeholders.
And on that, so a lot of a big topic that's coming up amongst our cyber insurers is business interruption. Obviously, when these things come into play, there is a potential to really disrupt the operations of an organization. Let's say it's like Nudge, or even their sort of third-party stakeholders. What are your thoughts when it comes to insurance in terms of supporting getting business back to BAU and getting things up and running? Is that an area in which your remit falls? Have you explored that as an organization? Or is the main priority as the InfoSec lead is just to be like, how are we going to do it in the short term, straight away, right now?
No, it's definitely not the short term, right? So if you look at information security from the old time, it's still about the CIA triad, and one of that is availability. So you need to provide availability to existing users to your solutions, right? Usually it's not the highest priority these days, because it's more about confidentiality and the integrity of the data. But availability is definitely between the top three, right? And business pressure is real. Business needs to be continued, and that's where business continuity planning and disaster recovery comes into place. It is extremely important that that's played out. That even if it's just on an annual biannual tabletop exercise with senior leadership teams and those informational group who can provide that data to the senior leaders who can make decisions, and we just had one within Nudge about 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
When it's interesting to play these out. Again, it's a little bit of role play, so I play both part. I play the security and privacy guy, and I'm the one who's providing the scenario, who's adding, injecting different information as we go through the workshop. And it's just interesting to see how different people react, and what is the decisions made based on the information what they have. And the more you get to practice these roles, when these hypothetical scenarios happening, the more confident you're going to be when there is actually an incident.
And what has, if you can share, what has surprised you the most from these tabletop exercises, or intrigued you the most, that's come up amongst other employees when you've done these scenarios?
So I think I was very, very surprised how well the senior leadership team, so the SLT part, the decision maker, work together. And some of the decisions what they made was exactly a textbook what I was expecting. I think that was just brilliant, right? So it was a hypothetical ransomware attack with a persistent threat over AI solution, and one of the response was just perfect. So I asked the legal person, that it's a ransom. We went through each person within it was 7 people all together in the room. We went through that. Okay, what do you think? What would you do? This is the ransom. I think it was just some ridiculous amount. Would you pay it or not, as Nudge, as the organization?
Okay.
And our CFO said that I would just ask the professionals, the specialists, our insurance covers this. And it's like, yes, that's exactly what we do, because we don't have experience with this, thankfully, touch wood. we are not experiencing ransomware. Nobody in that room ever had a ransomware attack when they were attacked. Again, touch wood. I'm very, very happy with that. And we just don't know what is the right call. But the cyber insurance, what we have, they entail these services that they provide support during an incident, and they provide recommendations. And obviously they go through this much more than we are, right? So they are much more practiced in these kind of events, and what is the right response based on, again, risk and benefits, what we wouldn't be able to evaluate.
So to your point, it's about sort of opening up the risk value chain and going, this is my remit. I understand Nudge as an organization. I know the processes. I know what we've implemented, but I have never seen this before. And that's when you bring in the other players, right?
Absolutely. You need to know what you don't know, right? And you have to be transparent about it. And that goes back against the culture as well.
And so I'm guessing, though, that their response is such a testament to what you guys have built within Nudge, and sort of educating different organizations and making people understand sort of like what that threat looks like. And it's best not to say, I know what I'm doing, and hand it over.
Yeah, that is correct.
Yeah, no, brilliant. And then, so I guess you were obviously wearing both hats. When we go back to sort of the scenario that we've created, obviously it's a little bit different to the ransomware one, where when you're speaking internally, so whether that's with your CFO, even the head of sales maybe coming in and being like, oh, why can't I access this area of the system? I need to get going with this. You obviously don't know how the threat actor is fully operating and what they're trying to achieve from this breach. How does a conversation with those different senior leaders within an organization actually go, and what is your priority to them? Obviously, you've seen how brilliant the response was of some of the senior leaders straight away, but have you ever sort of pre-anticipated or thought about what the potential would be when someone's like, no, I'm not getting this, I need to get on with this? How would you overcome that sort of challenge?
So let me see if I understand your question.
Sorry, that was a lot there.
Yeah, it is. I just try to decipher it. So I think, business pressure, it's coming from all angles, right? So sales is worrying about an upsale or turning a prospects into a client. Customer success worrying about a renewal. They need access to the platform right now. Just turn it back on. So I think bringing these stakeholders in a controlled channel into the room, right? I call it a boardroom. I just old habit. The incident room, just calling it the incident bridge, just calling it in a controlled channel, and their input is shaping the communication, the actions. They are not directing it. So, and again, it's just valuing it out. What is the short term and the long term value here, right? So what are the risks what we need to balance here? Because there is a good chance that sales doesn't fully get the whole picture about the risks on a longer term or a reputational damage, that yes, you might be able to turn these prospects into a client, but we're going to lose 5 within 12 months if we don't carry on with the lockdown, with the full system shutdown. So it's definitely something which has to be managed. The business pressure at these stages, even just a system interruption during a system interruption, is big, because all stakeholders want to know what's happening. They're responsible. They are worrying about their client base. Again, that would be marketing, sales, customer support, client support. So these are the stakeholders what you need to manage in a way that you are providing information in a segment that they can understand, that they can translate into their stakeholders, which are the client.
No, very interesting.
I hope I answered the right question.
You did. You answered it perfectly. And I think, like, building on that, so another element that I'm always intrigued by is sort of the third party risk, and how so many organizations now rely on each other and are integrated with each other, and we can sort of become more reliant on different systems that are shared between different organizations within industries. Nudge as an organization obviously works with and sits with lots of huge organizations globally and within the UK. What's sort of your take on how do you balance integrating new companies and working with new systems with this idea that also they could be a part of a potential breach when it happens? And how does that change? What does that mean in practice in terms of who is responsible for solving a potential breach and where the responsibility lies, basically?
So as you highlighted, we are a B2B2C business, right? So we are contracted by usually a larger employer, and we are providing services to employees of that employer, right? So it's a very interesting triangle between the privacy, governance, and it spans into hours long conversations that who's responsible for what. But I think so responsibility is shared, right? But morally and operationally, we are not hiding behind that. The duty of care extends to the employee. Yes, the contract is with the employer, but the duty of care is definitely extends to that employer employees. So the way there are contractual obligations when we are expanding our services into or acquiring another third party is definitely something what we notify our clients, the whoever we have the contractual obligations, and be making sure that the third party what we are acquiring has the same standard as we have,
Right.
because that's a very, very important segment of the puzzle, because you are as strong as your weakest link, right? So if we would hire something or we would acquire an organization as an integrated solution into our environment who are not the top of the game, we would just invite a breach and we would be fully responsible for that.
Interesting. And then as alongside that, Nudge has expanded quite considerably over recent years. How does that expansion, whether that's into new regions or new remits, impact your role as the InfoSec leader? And what has it revealed to you from a personal and also an organizational perspective in terms of what the risk and regulatory priorities are for an organization?
Okay. So let me slice that question a bit, because that's a quite complex one.
Yes.
So expanding into different global territories has, from a data privacy and information security perspective, has its challenges, and you need to look at it from different lens to make sure that you are applying the right control measures to the right stages as you are moving into a phased rollout globally, right? And this is what I'm talking about. So, for example, a great example that, yes, we are managing our data privacy governance around GDPR, but obviously GDPR is not global. So wherever there are local privacy regulations outside of the jurisdiction of GDPR, we have to make sure that we are meeting those local privacy regulations. So we do carry out mapping, and when you start managing not just an individual, a single operating model for data privacy, it becomes a complex trust model where you need to manage every change within the environment into that trust model, which are globally spans into different jurisdictions. And again, so information security is quite straightforward, because it has usually have your best practice. Usually you have basic things what you follow, which is expected from an organization, from a SaaS fintech organization, when you talk about encryption, data ingress, data in transit, when you talk about who has access to the data, identity and access management. So these are quite universal. And even some places where they are not enforced or not expected, you still stand up to those best practices, because you are not going to go under it just because you don't have to. With data privacy, is much more complex. You need to think about localization. You need to think about data subject rights, breach notifications, cultural expectation. So it's a much more to manage. It's not just I'm gonna say hard logical controls around the security of the data and the environment, but a much more complex weave of legal
Staying on
maze.
top of those regulations as well, because I assume they're constantly changing. So you're so right to say, to the point of like, it doesn't matter whether you have to, you need to, and you want to as an organization, but also sometimes you might not even realize when something's slightly changed or altered within a different region, particularly if you've never operated there before.
Exactly. So we have, again, that's why we have mapping. So we do carry out mapping. We do have a dedicated resource who's specialized in data privacy, who's looking into changes. So any update, it just gets into the relevant channel and fed into our governance model, which is updated so that all the changes are reflected to making sure that we are compliant to an acceptable level to any of these. It is interesting. So we are lucky in a sense that we are a reasonably regulated data privacy region. So right, so UK is one of the, so GDPR, either UK or EU GDPR, it's one of the, it's an amazing balance of data subject rights and the strictness of regulation. So when we expanded into the US, we didn't need to worry about oversee data transfers because we had all of those control measures in place. If it would have been the other way around, because they don't have a global, a statewide privacy regulation, that how they manage it. They are so they are segmented out. So they are not a nationwide, just a state by state one. It would have been much more difficult, but because we already have that in place, it was a fairly, I'm gonna say that in quotes, easy process
Looking back
to do
on
it. Yeah, looking back on it, it could have been much worse.
Okay. I'm guessing that sort of means you've had other challenges in other expanding into other regions. That's a whole different kettle of fish.
Yeah. So when you look at China, that brings a different. Obviously, that's a very highly regulated area. Definitely with the data localization, how you managing that. Again, the cultural aspect comes into it. It's just a different level.
I don't envy you navigating all those differences. Like,
You learn to love it. So trust me, the amount of conversation I had about data controllers and data processors and joint controllers, I truly cannot count it. And you learn to love it. Well, I do anyway.
Now you're fascinated by it. I mean, it is fascinating how also like the different perspectives and takes from different people. But to stay on top of it, that's a real challenge. I don't
Yes,
envy you.
absolutely.
So we always ask all of our guests that come on if they could advise or say one thing from a security as a security professional, and obviously a data privacy specialist, is looking at the risk management sector, the legal sector, insurance sector. If you were speaking to those teams within different organizations or in a different environment and not looking at the technology aspect, how would you advise that they think about the companies they trust with their data, and what would be the one piece of advice that you would give them when they're operating, putting them in their shoes when they're running a business?
You need to give me a minute for that. Okay. So I think what I see, yeah, that's a great question, by the way. So what I see more often than not, that organizations do reasonably well of the initial due diligence and due care process while onboarding, acquiring new solution providers into their environment, to trust their own data or their employers' data, or either direct or indirect access to that data. And I think it just needs to go beyond, because right now I feel like it becomes a checkbox exercise. So the due diligence, the third-party due diligence, especially these days when it's so important how you manage your third parties, is just a tick box exercise. Yes, we send out the due diligence assessment. Yes, they filled it out. Yeah, ticks all the boxes. Yeah, they sent a few screenshots, a new architecture document which detailing the infrastructure and network layout. All good. Moving to the next one. So they are doing very well with gathering certifications, policies. Yes, we done our due diligence. We collected all of the policies from them. We have their certification for ISO 27001, 42001, cyber insurance, whatever is on SOC 2 attestation. But it needs to be one level deeper. It needs to be more granular. It needs to have a conversation with the team, not who can provide these documentation to clients to see, to obtain the services of those organizations, but how do they do under pressure? What do you do if you have an incident? Let's walk through. You have an incident. When do you gonna tell me? Yes, I told you that you have to tell me without undue delay or no longer than 24 hours. How is that feasible? What's going to happen between just like the conversation what we have?
Culturally, what are you doing?
Yes.
And how not just what it looks like on paper.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's very. And do you think that completely changes the response to an incident? Completely changes your relationship with a different organization and the culture and the security?
So you are building trust at that point. Again, not just doing a checkbox exercise, but there is sometimes a dedicated individual team for third party management, or not sure what is the it differs, right? So the name of the team is or the role is differs from organization to organization, but just to make sure that you are the next every December, just make sure you send out this assessment. This would be a OneTrust or a spreadsheet, so they fill it out. Make sure that you get the latest pen test. Make sure that you get their up-to-date ISO 27001 certification, and you done your job. And it's like, yes and no. You have done your job, and you can and as an organization you can hide behind the due diligence, but you haven't explored the trust with that organization.
And that's so important as well, particularly when there's a lot of high risk information involved. One final question for you, Peter, is what are you most, and I feel when we talk about cybersecurity and we talk about data privacy, there's a lot of like scary worst case scenarios, a lot of negative energy around the topic. What are you most excited for in terms of how the sector is evolving and developing in the next 6 months? Is there anything that's catching your eye?
So I think everybody's talking about AI right now. It's coming out from the sink when you open the tab, and there is positives and negative sides to it. And we just need to make sure that cybersecurity is catching up. It's not gonna stay in the old way of managing their attack surface, their security posture. That AI is integrated into a responsible way, and I think it comes to that now we move from a static chatbot into a dynamic agentic AI world, and I think that brings a very high risk with it. So because right now the agents, the agentic AI, it's no longer an AI risk, it's an identity risk, because the amount of responsibilities and access control and provisioning that agent gets, it's unbelievable. And what I hope is going to happen within the next 6 months, it's that governance will catch up with that provisioning of agents into environments, just for the sake of it, just to organizations say that yes, we have 50% of our BAU activities are outsourced into an AI agent, and now it carries out all those activities.
And do you think people are starting to talk more about, everyone's so excited about how quickly it's evolved and how useful it is, but actually governance, regulation, pulling things back a little bit? Do you see that perspective shared amongst colleagues and different
I
groups?
think so. It's coming into more and more in front of people's mind. That it's great that we have these capabilities, that we can be more efficient and more effective in so many ways, and we can move some of the activities out to these agents, and now they can think about how the governance around them, right? And it's picking up. So you can see that the threads and relevant platforms, and that could be Reddit, LinkedIn, right? So it's there, and they are now picking up the governance on this. There are some advocates who are really pushing for this, and that's just amazing to see.
Yeah. We'll get there. We'll definitely get there. Well, Peter, thank you so much. It's been an absolute
Thank you so much,
pleasure.
Sasha.
And loved picking your brains, and I'm sure everyone will enjoy listening to it too.
Thank you so much, Sasha. Have a nice one. Bye.